Greetings, tort scholars, and welcome to this review of battery. A battery is an intentional tort that protects an individual's interest in bodily security. To prevail on a battery claim, a plaintiff must demonstrate by a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant acted intending to cause a harmful or offensive contact to the plaintiff, and such a contact results. Let's analyze these battery elements. An act requires a volitional movement, that is, a willful muscular action. Here, the individual with the gun volitionally moved her arm and trigger finger and thus purposefully acted. An action that is purely reflexive or convulsive, however, involving no voluntary manifestation of will, does not suffice. Here, the sleeping man did not consciously move his leg, and thus did not legally act for purposes of tort law. Intent focuses on the defendant's subjective mindset. Intent requires that the defendant act with the desire to bring about a particular result, or that the defendant act knowing that a tortious result is substantially certain to occur. The act and intent requirements apply to all intentional torts, and because they deserve more particularized focus, are the subject of a separate practice-perfect review. All batteries, by definition, involve contacts, or physical bodily invasions. A contact can happen directly by body-to-body connection, or by something extending from the body. Contacts that satisfy the definition can also be indirect, such as when the defendant creates a force that ultimately connects with the plaintiff. Moreover, the contact requirement is satisfied if the defendant touches or causes the touching of something closely associated with the plaintiff's body. Battery law recognizes two distinct types of contacts that support liability: those that are harmful and those that are offensive. A contact is harmful when it causes bodily harm, which is defined as any physical impairment on the condition of another's body. Suppose Jane assertively reaches out, takes John's hand, and shakes it. Would this qualify as a harmful contact? A contact it is, but harmful it is not. While harmful is indeed defined as any physical impairment, physical harm requires more than a simple change in the condition of a plaintiff's body. While there are circumstances in which this might qualify as offensive, more about that in a moment, a change must be detrimental to qualify as harmful. Suppose Jane slaps John on the wrist, breaking it. Would this qualify as a harmful contact? Indeed, this contact is harmful. Note that there can be varying degrees of harm, and the jury's damage award will reflect the relative degree of harm that the plaintiff incurs. A bruise will not require as much monetary compensation as loss of life or limb, yet both qualify as harms. The restatement distinguishes between contacts that create bodily harm and those that create offensive harm, that is, emotional or dignitary harm. Note that the definition is objective. If a reasonable person would find the contact offensive, it's offensive. And what a reasonable person might find offensive will vary with the circumstances. It is evaluated in light of community standards. Suppose Mary tenderly strokes her son Marcus's hair at home. If Marcus were to bring a claim for battery, would this qualify as an offensive contact? No. In their home environment, with the contact between a mother and son, a reasonable person would likely not find Mary stroking Marcus's hair to be offensive, even if Marcus did not particularly care for it. Suppose, however, Carla, Marcus's boss, stroked Marcus's hair at a work meeting. If Marcus were to bring a claim for battery, would this qualify as an offensive contact? Yes. In a work environment, when the unwanted contact is coming from an employer, a reasonable person would likely find that contact offensive. In this way, tort law distinguishes between socially acceptable non-tortious contacts and socially offensive tortious batteries. Here is one of the more complicated issues in battery law. Must the plaintiff show an actor has intent to cause a harmful contact or intent to cause an offensive contact? Or is it sufficient that the plaintiff show an intent to cause a contact that turns out to be harmful or offensive? The answer depends on the jurisdiction's approach. Most jurisdictions interpret the language intent to cause a harmful or offensive contact to require that a plaintiff show that the defendant had a specific intent to cause a harmful contact or specific intent to cause an offensive contact. This requires that the defendant intend two things: a contact and specifically a harmful contact or an offensive contact. Such jurisdictions are called dual intent jurisdictions because they require proof of subjective desire or knowledge of both of those things. Conversely, in a single intent jurisdiction, all that matters is that the defendant intend a contact that turns out to be harmful or offensive. Imagine a student who lightly pokes another student on the leg with their foot to get that student's attention, and that light poke ends up causing an infection. In a single intent jurisdiction, this would be sufficient for intent, whereas in the dual intent jurisdiction, it likely would not be. And what if the defendant didn't actually intend to contact someone else at all, but merely meant to scare them and only accidentally contacted them? If a defendant intended to make the plaintiff expect an imminent harmful or offensive contact and accidentally caused a harmful or offensive contact, the defendant caused a battery. This is actually a doctrine known as transferred intent between and among torts. The restatement's definition of battery incorporates transferred intent among torts by holding actors liable if they intend an assault but get a battery. Here's an interesting variation on the transferred intent theme. What if Arnold meant to contact Lisa, missed, and accidentally contacted Darla? Can Darla sue Arnold for a battery? Yes. For purposes of a battery, a defendant must intend to cause an unwanted contact with the plaintiff or a third person. What if Jane tries to shoot John but misses? A battery is only complete when a harmful or offensive contact occurs. While it might perhaps be another tort like assault, where there's no resulting contact, there's no resulting battery. Imagine Mary, as a good-natured practical joke, trips Luis as he was walking onto the stage to deliver a speech. Luis takes a nasty fall and suffers permanent brain damage. Will Luis be able to recover for his damage, even though Mary at most thought Luis would stumble? Yes. For purposes of a battery, the law will hold Mary liable for all the resulting harm, even where she did not intend those particular results. What matters is that Mary intended the invasion of a legally protected interest. Here, Mary did intend an offensive contact, a public stumble. She is liable for Luis' resulting harm. There are some important defenses to a battery. When a defendant is lawfully defending herself, she has a valid defense to a battery claim. And when a plaintiff consents to the contact, there is no battery. Both consent and self-defense are the subjects of separate practice-perfect reviews. Be aware that in a number of jurisdictions, the absence of consent is a matter for the plaintiff to show, because its absence is considered an aspect of the plaintiff's prima facie battery claim. Finally, remember that, as with all tort claims, a plaintiff must show both actual and proximate causation. For purposes of a battery, a plaintiff must not only show that the defendant had the requisite intent, but she must also show that the damages for which she seeks compensation causally resulted from the defendant's battery. This concludes our Practice Perfect review on battery. We recommend you practice applying your newly acquired battery knowledge by taking our Practice Perfect battery quiz.